You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's now go over the good that we have seen from the coaching staff at the halfway point of the season. Once again, Syracuse football is 5-1 in their second bye week of the year. They got a ranked Pitt team on the road next Thursday. Let's talk about the good of the coaching staff through 6 games. I think the biggest one for me has been their clock management. All right. We have a couple of examples where they showed excellent clock management. It mostly falls on the head coach and Fran Brown, but it also is a credit to the coordinators as well, whoever is calling plays on both sides of the football. Let's talk about the end of the first half against Ohio. In that one, Syracuse football was up 10-9, if you recall, at the end of the first half, but then scored a late touchdown to go up 17-9. A lot of that was because of coaching. The fact that Fran Brown knew to call timeouts while Ohio was driving, credit to the Syracuse defense for forcing a field goal on that drive to make it 10-9. Fran Brown successfully utilized his timeouts to preserve enough clock for the Orange to go down the field and eventually get that touchdown. It was a touchdown at Trebor Pena in that one. It put him up 17-9 at the end of the first half. It sounds so simple, like call timeouts to preserve clock, but clock management is much easier about me talking about it than it actually is in practice. For whatever reason, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard to manage a clock, but I got to praise it because there are so many coaches who just have no idea what they're doing. Fran Brown, in his very first game as a head coach, knew exactly what to do, how to manage the clock at the end of the first half against Ohio. Credit to the play calling of Jeff Nixon, calling the right plays on that drive. If you recall, there was about 10 seconds left in the half. They were at the Ohio 20-yard line, and there were 2 options. You could kick the field goal at that spot, and that would have been a fine choice. That's fine. Or the second one is, well, if you're going to run a play, you got to run it to the end zone. And, well, they chose option B. They threw a pass into the end zone. It was a low-risk pass, so even if it didn't work out, there was no risk of an interception or a sack fumble or anything like that. And it just wound up working out as a touchdown. But guess what? Worst case, it would have been incomplete, and the Orange just settle for a field goal and hopefully go up 13-9 against Ohio. But the clock management in that Ohio game was superb. And then both halves against UNLV. Sensational clock management by Syracuse and terrible clock management by UNLV. I ripped Barry Odom in that postgame for his clock management. All right. It was awful. Syracuse, if you recall, in the first half was down 21-14. About 6 minutes left in the first half. And they go right down the field in 6 minutes, kick a field goal to only be trailing by 4 at the end of the first half against UNLV. And they leave no time on the clock for UNLV to do anything. Now, you got to credit Syracuse for bleeding the clock down enough so that UNLV has no time, and also taking advantage of the fact that Barry Odom doesn't know how to manage a clock. This is why I am praising Syracuse for clock management, because we saw in the UNLV game, Barry Odom, no clue what he was doing. No clue. It matters. It matters. And then, why it matters so much? Well, Syracuse was down 21-17 at the half against UNLV. And then they scored a touchdown on the first drive of the second half to go up 24-21. So, basically, without UNLV touching the ball or having a chance to do anything with it, because they had like 7 seconds to do something, but that's nothing. 7 seconds is nothing. You had no time, right? So, for all intents and purposes, UNLV did not touch the ball. They were up 21-14, and the next time UNLV got the ball, they were down 24-21. Credit to the Syracuse coaching staff for managing the clock efficiently at the end of the first half against UNLV. And then the second half, again, insane clock management at the end of the fourth quarter there. Syracuse was driving for the game-tying touchdown. They do eventually get it to Jackson Meeks. Got a little bit of some fortunate breaks on the drive, but hey, you'll take it, right? And they only left UNLV 23 seconds in that fourth quarter to do anything. and UNLV had all 3 timeouts but decided to kneel the ball. Again, excellent job by Syracuse to run the clock down to basically give UNLV no time to do anything, and they were very conservative. They played for overtime. It bit them in the butt. They shouldn't have played for overtime. There was no reason to play for overtime. And again, I am praising the Syracuse coaching staff for the clock management because UNLV's clock management was so poor, and you can make an argument that that was the number one reason why they lost that game. Imagine if Barry Odom does call his timeouts and UNLV has a minute to go to drive down the field and get a field goal to beat Syracuse. That could have easily happened, but it didn't, and you got to give credit to Syracuse for the fact that take advantage of your opponent making a mistake and making them pay, leaving basically no time on the clock to do anything at the end of the fourth quarter. And obviously Syracuse goes on to win in overtime. A huge game for the Orange in that one, getting its second ranked victory of the season against UNLV. So that I will definitely praise on this coaching staff. The clock management through 6 games, I have been impressed. I've been impressed. Number 2, there's not really, this one, there's less analysis, I guess, to it, but it's just something I want to point out here. They're finding ways to win with adversity. Okay, they're finding ways to win. Aside from the Stanford game, which remains a black eye on the schedule for Syracuse, it just remains like, how did they lose that game? Aside from that one, they found ways to win, specifically in the last 2 games. Okay, because they didn't really face too much adversity against Georgia Tech. They controlled that one from start to finish. I get it. It got a little dicey at the end, but it was fine, right? Holy Cross, no one ever thought they were actually going to lose to Holy Cross, okay? There was no chance. UNLV, they could easily have lost, but they found a way to win. And against NC State, while Syracuse was controlling the game against NC State, they could have lost that game. There were a lot of blunders in those games, and that's for tomorrow's podcast when we go over some of the bad of Syracuse's season at the midway point. But today we're going to focus on the good. There were blunders in those games, but you got to credit the coaching staff for keeping this team level-headed, because it's very easy to get frustrated over a bad call, a missed assignment, this, that, whatever it is. It's very easy to get frustrated, okay? I have seen it. I've seen it with Syracuse. I've seen it on plenty of other teams, college, pro, high school, you name it, where a bad call, one bad play ends a game for an entire team. If you remember last year for Syracuse, they played North Carolina on the road. They were facing Drake May, and let's be honest, they weren't going to win that game, all right? They were not going to beat Drake May on the road, but it didn't help that there was a really bad call in the first quarter, I want to say, when the game was still somewhat in the balance. It was a 4th down play or a 3rd down play, and it looked like, I don't remember the whole logistics of it, but there was a ruling where the ball was short of the line to gain for NC State, but the referees called it as in 1st down for North Carolina, not NC State, for North Carolina. It completely derailed the game for Syracuse, okay? Completely derailed it. It was a bad call, and Dino Babers, it's on the coaching staff for the fact that this team basically quit after that. It was a terrible effort against North Carolina after that play happened. A bad call completely ruined the game for Syracuse, and they ended up getting annihilated. I'm not saying they lost because of it. They were probably going to lose anyway, but you would have hoped that they would be more competitive in that one than they were. Okay? So I've seen it. But this team, this coaching staff, when there's adversity, when there's a bad call, they find ways to win. They found a way against NC State. There were some ticky-tack calls against NC State, okay? I do agree with the referees on the illegal formation on the field goal because it technically was a legal formation. I know the verbiage kind of gets everyone confused because he wasn't lined up directly over the center, but the rule is the body. The rule is basically the shoulders. And if you looked, the defensive tackle for Syracuse was right in line with the shoulders of the center. It was ticky-tacky, but it's the letter of the law. It was a legal formation there. And that's something that this coaching staff is going to have to clean up. They can't have that happen again. It led to a touchdown for NC State. Then there was the the 72-yard touchdown for NC State that they were gifted, I don't even know what to say about that one when he was forced out of bounds. He wasn't forced out of bounds. Give me a break, okay? If that's forced out of bounds, then every tackle is unnecessary roughness, okay? That was horrible. But credit to the coaching staff. Didn't let it phase Syracuse. They found a way to win anyway. It's easy as fans. It's easy as a radio host or a podcast host to get mad at officials or to get mad at blown assignments or anything like that. But it's on the team to stay level-headed, and that is a credit to this coaching staff. So the two things that I've been impressed with this coaching staff so far at the halfway point, the clock management has been really good, and just finding ways to win when there is adversity, aside from the Stanford game. So credit to the coaching staff for that.